For over 100 years, the stars had known peace, or so the Dominion thought. They had extinguished the last traces of humanity long ago, their once proud empire reduced to only fragments of myth and old history. The human colonies scattered across the galaxy had vanished into the darkness of space. With their planets destroyed, their cities turned to ash. It was assumed that humanity's pride had led to their own destruction. The Dominion's historians had celebrated the fall of Earth as the final proof that their reign would go unchallenged forever. But they were wrong. In the heart of the Dominion's most secure sector, in the skies above the bustling metropolis of Vion Prime, something unimaginable happened. There was no sign, no warning, not a single blip on the radar. One moment the skies were clear, then in an instant the fabric of space itself seemed to tear apart. A warship appeared, vast and ancient, drifting through the cosmos like a ghost, its hull covered in scars of long-forgotten battles. It was massive, easily 5 times the size of any Dominion dreadnought. Its design was unfamiliar, as if it had come from a time before even the oldest records, a relic of a forgotten age. There were no markings, no insignia to identify it. It simply existed. For a moment, the Dominion fleet stood still, unsure of what they were witnessing. No engines, no communication, no threat, yet everything about it screamed danger. The ship hovered in place, unmoving, as if daring them to make the first move. The commanding officers on Vion Prime's central station stared at the readings in disbelief. "It's human," a young officer stammered. His words echoed across the room, but the silence that followed made them seem like a terrible confession. The human race was supposed to be gone, wiped out by their own hubris. And yet, here it was. High Commander Rail, standing before the observation window in the command tower, narrowed his gaze. He had led Dominion fleets to countless victories, each one more decisive than the last. But now he wasn't sure what to do. "How is this possible?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else in the room. The officers looked at each other, their hands hovering over their control panels, unsure of how to respond to the impossible. No one had prepared them for this. The warship didn't make a sound as it drifted closer to Vion Prime. It didn't register on any of the Dominion's scanners. It was as though it had slipped into existence from nowhere, from another time or another dimension. The first officer on duty activated the emergency protocols, but still nothing happened. No signals, no communications, no attack. Just a presence that grew stronger the closer it came. Emperor Kalor, the ruler of the Dominion, stood in his private chamber, watching the unfolding scene on the holoscreens. He had spent years building his empire, his strength. He had fought wars, conquered systems, and silenced countless rebellions. He thought the galaxy was his to command, that nothing could challenge him. But this was something different. "Get me a line to the fleet," Kalor barked. His voice, usually calm and in control, now quivered with a hint of uncertainty. The holo display flared to life, showing the image of the warship floating in space, surrounded by a sea of Dominion ships that stood paralyzed in its presence. "I want answers now," Kalor demanded. But as the seconds stretched on, no answers came. The warship simply remained there, its cold, black surface reflecting the stars like an ancient mirror to the galaxy's past. The tension in the air was palpable. Whatever this ship was, wherever it had come from, one thing was certain: the Empire's confidence was crumbling. Then the ship moved, and that was when the fear truly began to sink in. Narpadavade. The ship moved, but it didn't move in the way any ship should. It didn't glide or accelerate like the well-oiled machines of the Dominion fleet. It didn't break through space with the usual burst of force or the crackling hum of energy that defined the ships of the galaxy. Instead, it shifted, swift and silent, like a shadow slipping through a crack in the universe. No engines flared, no wake formed behind it. It was as though space itself bent around the vessel, obeying its presence like the universe knew it was something different. For a heartbeat, it hovered there, still as death, and then, like the strike of a predator's fangs, it moved again, this time with purpose. The Dominion fleet, frozen in confusion and fear, had no time to react. Officers scrambled at their stations, attempting to track the ship's erratic path, but their instruments were useless. No matter how they adjusted their readings, the warship was everywhere and nowhere, moving through the void as though it belonged to the fabric of space itself. The crew members of Vion Prime stared at their screens in horror, unable to process the surreal sight. Then came the pulse. It was a single burst of energy, colorless, silent, and faster than light itself. Before anyone could comprehend what was happening, the pulse reached its target, 4 of the Dominion's finest warships. They were torn apart with the sheer force of the blast, not blown up or obliterated in the typical way, but disintegrated at the molecular level. No explosions, no debris, just nothing, as if the ships had never existed at all. The fleet commanders couldn't believe their eyes. No warning, no signs of damage. They were simply gone. Panic spread like wildfire across the fleet. The once calm control rooms erupted into chaos. Alarms blared, red lights flashing as every console went into overdrive. Fleet officers began shouting orders, but no one could figure out what to do. The ship hung above them, silent, waiting. It was like an animal watching its prey, knowing that it could strike again at any moment. The atmosphere on Vion Prime's command station became suffocating, as if the air itself had thickened with dread. Emperor Kalor, who had always carried himself with the poise and confidence of a man who knew he ruled everything within his grasp, was now visibly shaken. His hands, usually steady, gripped the armrests of his throne, his claws digging into the stone as he stared out at the warship. His normally sharp amber eyes that had seen 1,000 battles and survived them all, now reflected something else: fear. The Empire, his empire, was in peril, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. This wasn't just a rogue attack or a revolt from one of the many rebellious systems. This was something far more dangerous, something ancient. "We need to communicate with it," one of his advisors, a trembling official, suggested. "Perhaps we can reason with them. Maybe—" "No!" Kalor barked, cutting him off. The Emperor's voice rang through the room, hoarse and furious. "If this is humanity, we do not negotiate. We do not speak. We obliterate." But even as he spoke the words, Kalor knew they weren't true. There was something about this ship, this ghost from the past, that filled him with an unease he couldn't explain. His empire had crushed humanity's remnants without a second thought. But this was no mere rebellion. This was something deeper, something that had waited. "We will not waste time," Kalor continued, his voice quieter but more menacing. "Mobilize the fleet. I want every ship prepared to engage. Send a message to the High Command. This ends now." The command station buzzed with frantic activity as officers scrambled to carry out the orders. Meanwhile, the warship, as silent as ever, remained in place, its eerie stillness mocking the Empire's panic. The seconds stretched on, an eternity of helplessness, and yet, despite the flood of orders being issued, no one made a move. No one dared. The warship was too perfect, too precise. Then, without warning, a signal crackled through the communications channels, something the Dominion couldn't ignore. The voice that came through was not robotic or mechanical as they had expected. It was human. Deep, calm, yet tinged with a weariness that spoke of decades, perhaps centuries of waiting. "Do you remember us?" the voice asked, the words lingering in the air like a whisper from the past. The officers in the room froze, their hands trembling on the controls. Kalor's expression twisted in confusion and fear, a slight shift in his regal demeanor as he leaned forward, listening intently. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp but unsure. "What do you want?" There was no immediate answer, but a single image flashed across every screen in the room, an old, weathered human face, marked with the passage of time, a face that bore the signs of someone who had lived through 1,000 battles, 1,000 losses. The face seemed to stare directly at the viewers, its gray eyes piercing through the cold, mechanical barriers of the command station. And beneath the image, written in bold, unmistakable letters, was a message: "We never left. Remember." The words hit Kalor like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, the weight of them sinking in as his mind raced to comprehend what they meant. The face, the eyes, it was human. Real, not a hallucination, not a trick. And the message? It was clear. The Empire had not wiped humanity out. They had merely vanished, retreating into the shadows, waiting, watching, and now they were back. A deep silence followed the broadcast. The entire room was paralyzed, each officer staring at their screens in shock. The usual hum of activity in the command center came to a standstill as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. "What does this mean?" Kalor whispered, his voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile calm that had settled over the room. "No one knows, Your Majesty," one of his advisors answered, his voice cracking. "It could be a rogue faction, an insurgent group that somehow survived." "Survived?" Kalor repeated, his voice rising. "Number humanity was supposed to be extinct. We killed them, wiped them from history." The room was silent again, this time as the weight of those words settled over them all. The Dominion, the greatest military power in the galaxy, had believed themselves to be invincible. But now, in the span of a few moments, everything they had built, everything they had believed, was crumbling before their eyes. It wasn't just that the ship was there, it was the message. Humanity hadn't died, they had endured. And now they had returned, not as beggars for survival, but as a reminder to the Empire of a forgotten truth. They had been wrong. Humanity wasn't gone. They had simply been waiting. Another silence fell over the command station. The warship above Vion Prime hovered still, waiting, as if the very air around it was holding its breath. And all the while, the message continued to echo in their minds, louder and louder. "We never left. Remember." Kalor straightened up, his chest heaving with a deep, guttural growl. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "Send a message across all frequencies. Tell them we will not bend, we will not break." But as the words left his lips, even Kalor couldn't shake the feeling that this was not a battle he could win. It wasn't just a ship that had appeared from the past. It was a reckoning. The Empire, once thought to be unshakable, was now face to face with the ghosts of its own making, and the battle had just begun. Narpadavade. The tension in the command station was unbearable, the air thick with the weight of uncertainty and fear. Kalor's voice, though commanding as always, now trembled with a hint of doubt as he barked his orders. His clawed hands trembled ever so slightly as he clutched the armrest of his throne, his thoughts racing. He had led countless campaigns, crushed rebellions, and consolidated his empire through sheer force. But this was different. Humanity was supposed to be gone, a myth, an ancient, outdated relic, and yet here it was, an undeniable force from the past, floating above their capital world. "Communications are ready, Your Majesty," one of the officers said, breaking Kalor's spiraling thoughts. The officer's voice was high-pitched, filled with apprehension. "Send the message," Kalor growled, his eyes narrowing. He had no intention of letting the Dominion show weakness in front of whatever this was. The fleet was already mobilizing, ready to defend Vion Prime, to defend their empire. But the unspoken fear hanging in the air was palpable. The officer at the comm panel hesitated before speaking, his voice crackling over the speakers. "This is Emperor Kalor of the Dominion. You will stand down and identify yourself. You are in violation of Imperial space, and we will take appropriate action to neutralize any threats." There was no response at first. The room held its collective breath. The officers' hands hovered over their controls, unsure whether to move forward with their orders. Kalor's expression was like stone, but his mind raced. What if this was the beginning of something far worse than they had anticipated? What if the humans, if it was truly them, had somehow surpassed the Dominion's technological advancements? The Empire had always believed their weapons, their ships, and their military prowess to be unparalleled. Could this ancient species have done what no one thought possible? Just as Kalor was about to demand a response, something happened. A single pulse of light blinked across the room. It wasn't like any signal the Dominion had ever seen. It wasn't a standard transmission. It wasn't even a frequency they recognized. It was a surge of raw energy, like a burst of information sent directly into their minds. For a fleeting moment, every officer in the room felt a cold shiver, as if something had pierced through their very souls. Then a voice crackled through the air. "Do you remember us, Emperor Kalor?" The voice was calm, chilling, almost mocking. It was unmistakably human. But there was something in the tone, something that hinted at centuries of experience, of loss, of power that the Empire could never have prepared for. Kalor froze, his body stiffening. It was the same voice as before, but now it resonated with more weight, more authority. The voice didn't just speak through the comm system. It felt as though it came from everywhere, inside their minds, inside their hearts. "I see you," the voice continued. "I see your empire built on the bones of a forgotten people. You've forgotten us, haven't you? But we never left." The last words hung in the air, and Kalor felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine. How could this be? How could they be alive? After all these years, all these centuries of hunting down their remnants, after erasing their history, how was it possible? Suddenly the atmosphere in the command room shifted. Officers exchanged frantic glances, their nerves fraying. One officer, a young technician, began typing furiously at his console, searching for any sign of an anomaly in the data streams, anything that could explain the unexplainable. But his efforts were in vain. There was no clear explanation. The technology the humans had apparently used was beyond anything the Dominion had developed. Kalor's mind raced. He had conquered star systems with ease, obliterated entire fleets with his weapons, and crushed rebellions in minutes. But this felt different. Humanity had never been known for their technological advancements in war. They were known for their brutality, their internal conflicts. But this wasn't a desperate last-ditch effort. This was something calculated, precise, intentional. "Continue the broadcast," Kalor snapped, his voice commanding once more, though his inner thoughts churned with unease. "Tell them that if they do not withdraw, we will destroy them. The full might of the Dominion fleet is ready to annihilate whatever remains of their misguided rebellion." But as the message was transmitted, Kalor felt something stir in the pit of his stomach. He had made threats before, but this time it didn't feel like a bluff. This time the words were heavy, almost hollow, as if speaking them was not enough. What if this wasn't just a rebellion? What if this was something bigger, something ancient, something far beyond the Dominion's reach? As if on cue, the warship in the skies above Vion Prime responded, its silhouette still motionless in the dark expanse of space. The Dominion fleet, now fully mobilized, surrounded the ship, their guns trained, their weapons systems ready. But still there was no attack, no defense. The warship seemed indifferent to them all, a quiet, unyielding force in the vast void. The tension in the command station mounted as officers exchanged nervous glances. Then a low hum resonated through the room, a sound unlike any they had ever heard. It was not coming from any of the Dominion ships. It was coming from the warship itself. It wasn't a weapon charging, nor was it a shield activating. It was something else, something deeper. And then, in a flash, the warship moved again. This time, it wasn't just floating, it was gliding. The Dominion fleet, already on edge, flinched, unsure of how to respond. The ship didn't fire a single shot. Instead, it simply moved, as if asserting its presence. The warship's sudden motion left the entire fleet frozen in place, unsure whether they should attack or retreat. "Open fire!" one of the fleet commanders shouted, his voice trembling as he slammed his fist on his console. The order rippled through the fleet, and moments later, every weapon in the Dominion's arsenal fired in unison. Lasers, plasma bolts, and missiles shot through the air, all aimed directly at the warship. The first shots hit with an explosion of energy, blinding light filling the darkened sky. But when the smoke cleared, the warship remained unscathed. No shields, no defense. It didn't even flinch. The Dominion fleet had fired everything they had, and yet the warship was still there, unharmed. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It had become an enigma. As the silence fell over the command room, Kalor stood frozen, his mind reeling with possibilities. What was this ship? What kind of power did it hold? How had humanity, if it was truly humanity, managed to survive? His mind raced to a chilling conclusion. This wasn't just an attack. This was a message, a statement. And the ship wasn't just there to fight. It was there to remind the Empire of something. "We are not afraid of you," the voice crackled once more. "You may think you have destroyed us, but we have only waited. And now we will remind you that the universe has a way of balancing itself." Kalor's breath caught in his throat. The voice wasn't just a message, it was a warning. And as the warship hovered above the capital, its presence a chilling reminder of something long forgotten. The Emperor realized the truth. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and now the true test was beginning. The warship above Vion Prime hovered like a specter from a forgotten past, its presence unwavering and unyielding. The silence that hung in the atmosphere was as thick as the tension in the command room. Kalor, his usual confidence shattered, stood motionless at the observation window. He had always believed that nothing could challenge the Empire. No force, no army, no rebellion. Nothing could topple the Dominion's iron grip on the galaxy. But this was different. The ship, whatever it was, had shattered all expectations, all assumptions. It had survived the fall of humanity, had waited for centuries, and now it was back to claim something that the Dominion had thought was buried forever. A young officer beside Kalor, her voice barely a whisper, spoke up. "Your Majesty, we need to reassess the situation. This isn't just a rogue attack. This is something beyond us." Kalor's eyes flickered toward her. For a brief moment, his gaze softened, as if he too was grappling with the enormity of what was unfolding. He had led countless campaigns against rebellions. He had crushed enemies, and he had watched empires rise and fall in the blink of an eye. But now, for the first time, he felt the bitter taste of uncertainty creeping into his mind. "What are you suggesting?" Kalor's voice was barely more than a growl. Perhaps we are looking at this all wrong," the officer continued, her voice shaking but growing more confident as she spoke. "This ship, if it truly is from humanity, may not be here to wage war. It's showing us something not by force but by its very existence. It wants us to understand something, Your Majesty." Kalor's gaze hardened, and he turned to face her. "We don't understand weakness. We do not negotiate with ghosts or relics. We annihilate them." His voice cracked, his anger rising, but deep down the words felt empty. The warship was still there, untouched by their most powerful weapons, its silence more deafening than any battle cry. "Then what do you propose?" Kalor demanded, his claws clenched tight around the railing. His mind raced, searching for a solution, any solution, that would allow the Empire to reassert control. But the warship above him, unmoving and implacable, refused to give him that luxury. The young officer hesitated before speaking again. I don't know, Your Majesty, but there's something in its silence, in the way it moves. It's not here to strike down the Empire. Not yet. It's here to watch us. It's here to remind us of something. What if it's waiting for us to act?" Kalor didn't answer immediately. He stared at the warship, feeling the weight of her words press against his chest. He had always prided himself on being a master of the battlefield, on being a step ahead of every foe. But this was different. It was like staring into the unknown, into a void that stretched far beyond the limits of his understanding. "Send another communication," Kalor finally ordered, his voice calmer now, though still laced with tension. "This time, tell them we understand they are a threat. We will not be intimidated, and we will not back down. We will destroy them, whatever they are." The officer quickly relayed the order, and the comm system hummed to life once again. But before any words could be spoken, the voice returned. "This is not a threat, Emperor Kalor. This is a warning." The words sent a chill through the room. The voice was calm, eerily calm, and yet it carried an undercurrent of something ancient, something primordial, as though it came from a time long before the Dominion had ever risen. Kalor clenched his teeth, his hands shaking slightly as he fought to maintain control. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice raw. "We will not surrender to you. Your time has passed. You are nothing but a shadow, a forgotten species. The Empire is eternal." "Eternal?" The voice laughed, low and cold. "You think you are eternal, Emperor? The Empire has ruled for centuries, but like all empires, it will fall. You will fall. Just as the galaxy turned its back on humanity, so too will it turn on you." The words hit Kalor like a physical blow. He had always believed the Dominion was invincible, that it could crush anything in its path, but now he wasn't so sure. There was something about the voice, something about the warship, that unsettled him in a way nothing ever had before. It was the weight of truth, of a reality that he had been blind to for too long. "Why now?" Kalor whispered, his voice barely audible. "Why come now, after all these years?" "Because the galaxy is forgotten," the voice replied, its tone now grave, almost sorrowful. "You have forgotten. You buried the truth, and now it is time for you to remember." Kalor staggered backward, his thoughts spiraling out of control. What was this ship? What was this force that had been hiding in the shadows, biding its time? And more importantly, why had it waited until now to reveal itself? "Why wait?" Kalor demanded, his fists clenched in frustration. "Why not strike now when we are at our weakest?" "Because you are not weak," the voice answered. "You are strong, too strong, and that is why you must learn to fall." The last words hung in the air like a curse, and for a moment Kalor stood frozen, his mind spinning with a mix of anger, fear, and confusion. The ship above Vion Prime hadn't come to destroy the Empire in a single strike. No, it was here to do something far more insidious. It was here to watch them, to test them, and to remind them of something they had long forgotten. Their power was not eternal. It was a chilling thought. In the depths of space, amid the cold vacuum and the endless stars, A forgotten species had waited, watching, knowing that one day they would return, not to fight, but to remind the Empire of what they had erased. The message was clear. The Empire was not invincible. The warship, despite its silent approach, was the harbinger of something greater, something older. "Commander Rail," Kalor finally said, his voice low but determined, "I want every fleet unit on standby. We will not bow to this relic of the past. We will show them that the Dominion is unyielding." Rail nodded, though his face betrayed doubt. "Of course, Your Majesty," he said. But even as he spoke, he knew there was something in the air, something unspoken that made the Emperor's command feel hollow. The fleet was ready, but the uncertainty was palpable. They had no idea what they were truly up against. Above them, the warship remained as still as ever, a silent sentinel in the black void. There were no weapons charged, no shields activated. It didn't need to move. It didn't need to act. The Dominion fleet had already done enough. Their fear was the weapon. The seed of doubt had already been planted. As the fleet prepared for an attack, Kalor couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a grave mistake. The warship above them wasn't just a threat, it was a reflection of the Empire's own arrogance, its own fear, and its own impending fall. And as the silence stretched on, Kalor knew deep down that the real battle was not one of firepower or strategy. It was a battle of ideas, a battle of who would control the future, who would rewrite the history that had been buried, and who would ultimately come to define the galaxy's fate. The warship wasn't here to destroy the Empire. It was here to remind them that their reign would never last. The war had already begun. Kalor stood motionless, staring at the screens that flickered with endless streams of data, his mind racing. For the first time in his life, he was forced to question the foundation upon which his entire empire rested. His thoughts were chaotic, tangled with doubt and fear. His grip on control was slipping, and with it, the certainty he had carried for so long. For years, the Dominion had stood at the apex of power, its military prowess unmatched, its grip on the galaxy unshakable. But now, in the face of this mysterious warship, this relic from humanity's forgotten past, he felt the walls of his empire begin to tremble. Above Vion Prime, the warship remained eerily still, like a stone dropped into the center of a pond, rippling outward in ways the Dominion couldn't understand. The silence that hung in the air was not just the absence of sound. It was the presence of something far more profound. It was the stillness before the storm, the calm that preceded a great upheaval. Kalor turned away from the observation window, his thoughts swirling with a growing sense of urgency. He had always believed that strength was the key to survival. The Dominion had crushed everything that dared challenge it, and he had ruled with an iron fist, imposing order and stability across the galaxy. But this was different. There was no aggression, no demand for power. There was only silence, a patient silence that made every nerve in Kalor's body ache with anticipation. Whatever this warship was, it wasn't here to fight, it was here to remind. "Your Majesty," Commander Rail said, his voice cutting through Kalor's thoughts, "the fleet is ready. We can launch an offensive immediately if that is your command." Kalor's amber eyes flickered with momentary indecision. He looked at the large holomap of the battle space, where every ship in the Dominion fleet was marked in red. A vast array of firepower poised and waiting. Their weapons were primed, their shields at full strength ready to engage the unknown enemy. Yet despite the overwhelming might of the Dominion fleet, Kalor felt a cold pit in his stomach. "No," Kalor said, his voice steady, but the doubt was there. "Not yet. I don't know what we're facing, and I don't want to be the one to make the first move." Rael stared at the Emperor, his face betraying his surprise. "But, Your Majesty, we can't allow them to simply linger. If this ship truly is human, we must strike quickly. The longer we wait, the more vulnerable we become. I know, Kalor replied, his voice low. But this is different. We're dealing with something far older than we imagined, something beyond our reach. He looked back at the warship, his mind lost in thought. Whatever happens, we must be careful. The room fell silent as the officers exchanged uneasy glances. Kalor's words hung in the air like a ghost, their weight pressing down on everyone in the room. There was a growing sense of unease, a creeping realization that this wasn't just another enemy to be crushed. This was something far more dangerous. The officer in charge of communications spoke up. Your Majesty, we've intercepted another message. It's a direct transmission to the fleet. The same voice, but this time, there's more. He hesitated, eyes flicking nervously between the Emperor and the rest of the room. Play it, Kalor ordered. The officer activated the transmission, and the familiar voice echoed through the room once again. You still do not understand, do you? The voice was calm, almost pitying. Your empire was built on the ashes of those who came before you. You think you've conquered the galaxy, but you have forgotten the truth. You have forgotten what you did. We never left. We have been watching, waiting, learning, and now we return, not to fight, but to remind you of the consequences of your arrogance. The message lingered in the air, and the weight of those words pressed down on Kalor's chest. The voice spoke with an authority that shook him to his core. It was not just a threat, it was a statement of truth. A truth that had been buried for centuries, hidden beneath the Empire's carefully constructed myths. Is there anything more, officer? Kalor asked, his voice sharp, demanding answers. No, Your Majesty, the officer replied, his voice shaky. There's no other transmission. It's silent again. No signs of movement from the ship. Kalor clenched his jaw. We never left. Those words echoed in his mind like a hammer, striking an anvil. Humanity had been thought extinct, erased from history by the Empire, and now, with a single ship, they were back. Not with an army or a fleet, but with something far more dangerous. Truth. The truth that the Empire's history was built on lies, on the genocide of an entire species. The truth that their victory was nothing more than a hollow facade. He turned away from the command station, his back to the officers. The weight of the truth was suffocating. The Dominion had created an empire built on the bones of countless civilizations, and yet it had always believed that it was untouchable, that no one would dare challenge its authority. The rise of the Dominion had been swift, and its grip on the galaxy had seemed unbreakable. But now, in the presence of this warship, Kalor could feel the foundation of his empire beginning to crack. Commander, Kalor said slowly, his voice cold, I want all available intelligence officers to start gathering data. I need to know everything we can about this ship, about humanity. Where are they hiding? How did they survive? Rael nodded. It will be done, Your Majesty. I want no stone left unturned, Kalor continued, his voice rising with barely contained fury. We will find them, and we will destroy them. If they think they can make demands of the Dominion, they are gravely mistaken. But even as he said the words, Kalor's mind wasn't so sure. What if humanity had changed in the centuries of silence? What if they had adapted, evolved into something far beyond what the Empire had ever anticipated? The fear, that ever-present doubt, continued to gnaw at him. There was no answer to this riddle, no strategy that could guarantee victory. The warship above them, though silent, was a reminder of something the Empire had forgotten, the power of survival, of waiting, of watching. Your Majesty, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was the officer in charge of planetary defense. We've detected something unusual. Kalor turned, his eyes narrowing. What is it? We've just received a transmission from the fringe systems, the officer explained, his voice strained. "It's not a signal we've ever intercepted before. It's human. A distress call, but from a long-forgotten channel, one we thought was lost with the collapse of humanity's colonies." The room fell silent as the implication of the officer's words sank in. A distress call? From humanity? But why now? Why, after all this time? Had they been hiding on the fringes of the galaxy, waiting for the right moment to strike? "Patch it through," Kaylor demanded. The officer quickly complied, and the room fell quiet as the transmission crackled to life. It was faint at first, but as the static cleared, a voice emerged, gravelly, distorted, but unmistakably human. "This is Captain Alara Hayes of the Human Resistance. To whoever receives this message, know that we are still alive. We've been waiting in the shadows, building, preparing. The Empire thought they had eradicated us, but we've been waiting, and now we're coming for you." The words sent a shiver through Kaylor's spine. The message was brief, but the gravity of it was undeniable. The Human Resistance had survived. They had been waiting, and now they were prepared to rise again. Kaylor's heart pounded in his chest as the implications hit him. The warship above them was not a lone vessel. It was the vanguard of something much larger, something the Empire could not possibly anticipate. Humanity had not been destroyed. They had evolved, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike back. "Prepare the fleet," Kaylor said, his voice dark with fury. "This is no longer just a threat. This is war." And as the officers scrambled to carry out his orders, the warship above Vion Prime remained silent, watching, waiting. The warship above Vion Prime remained eerily still, suspended in the void of space. The vastness of its silence was a stark contrast to the chaos and fear that had overtaken the Dominion's command center. Kaylor stood before the holomap, watching as his fleet assembled for what could only be described as an uncertain battle. Every ship was in position, every weapon primed. The might of the Empire, its finest vessels, was arrayed before the human relic that had dared to challenge their dominance. And yet, as Kaylor stared at the map, his mind raced with doubt. The humanity he had dismissed as a footnote in history had become something far more terrifying. A force that had survived for centuries in the shadows, gathering strength, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It wasn't just a physical threat, it was the embodiment of a forgotten truth. The Dominion had built itself on lies, on erasing humanity from existence, and now that lie had come crashing down, threatening everything they had built. "Commander Rail," Kaylor said, his voice strained, though his outward demeanor remained composed. "What are the human forces in this sector?" Rail's fingers moved swiftly across his console, pulling up the latest intelligence reports. "We have identified several scattered fleets on the outer fringes of the galaxy. They've been assembling, moving under the radar. It's possible they've been waiting for the right moment to strike. We've also detected significant activity in the Varel system. There's more at play here than just this one warship." Kaylor's fists clenched, the metal of his claws scraping against the stone of his throne. If they think they can take the Dominion by force, they are gravely mistaken. This empire is not weak. We will burn them out of the galaxy once and for all. "Your Majesty," Rail began cautiously, "I must urge caution. The humans are not acting like a standard enemy. They're not attacking. They're observing. And what if—" He trailed off, unwilling to voice the doubt that hung in the air. "What if they're planning something worse?" Kaylor finished for him. He straightened, his posture rigid with authority, though his mind still teetered on the edge of uncertainty. "Then we will show them the might of the Dominion. We will crush them, and we will remind them why we are the rulers of this galaxy." With a firm motion, Kaylor turned to the officers standing by. "Mobilize the fleet, deploy every ship. We will take this threat head-on. Do not hesitate. Our superiority is absolute. The humans are relics of a dead time. We will make sure they never rise again." The officers scrambled to carry out the orders, but even as Kalor gave his command, the oppressive silence from above the planet persisted. The warship didn't move. It didn't respond to the Imperial fleet's preparations. It simply hovered, a looming presence that seemed to mock the Empire's desperate motions. Kalor's eyes flicked over the fleet display once more, his thoughts tangled with what little they knew. Humanity had disappeared, and the Dominion had celebrated that victory for decades. But now, that victory was crumbling before his eyes. The warship was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol. It was the reminder that the past could not be erased, that no empire, no matter how vast or powerful, could truly wipe out a people. The transmission from the human resistance echoed in his mind again. "We've been waiting. We're coming for you." The fleet began to move, forming a tight formation around Vion Prime. Each ship was aligned for a swift attack, ready to unleash their weapons on the unknown. But still, the warship above them made no move. It wasn't an attack. It was a challenge. The humans were playing a game that the Dominion didn't yet understand. "Why aren't they firing?" one of the officers whispered. "Why aren't they doing anything?" "They're not here to fight us," Kalor said, his voice cold and low. "They're here to make us fight ourselves." The realization hit him with full force. The humans didn't need to destroy the Empire. They were doing it from the inside. They were playing a longer game, one of fear and paranoia. They had already begun to erode the foundation of the Dominion simply by showing up, by existing. The Empire's sense of invincibility had been shattered, and no amount of firepower would put it back together. "Commander, are we ready?" Kalor asked, his voice sharper now. But there was an underlying tremor of doubt. "All ships are in position, Your Majesty," Rael responded, his voice steady despite the uncertainty that had taken root. "We're ready to engage on your command." Kalor looked up, his mind made up, but his heart heavy with a sense of inevitability. There was no turning back. The war had begun. He could feel it in the very air, thick with the tension of centuries of lies about to be exposed. "Then let us make our move," he said firmly. "Fire." The first volley of fire lit up the sky like a new star. The Dominion fleet unleashed everything they had, every weapon at their disposal, aimed directly at the warship that hovered above Vion Prime. The plasma lances, the ion beams, the missiles, all of them streaked across the sky toward the target. The warship, for the first time, moved. It shifted in space like a shadow, gliding effortlessly away from the incoming barrage, dodging with precision that was almost inhuman. The fleet commanders gaped in disbelief as their weapons struck nothing but empty space. The warship wasn't simply moving, it was anticipating their every move. It was as if the ship itself was alive, a living, breathing force that had been watching them long before they even knew it was there. And then, in a single fluid motion, the warship retaliated. A pulse of energy faster than the eye could see erupted from the ship. It wasn't a laser or a missile or anything the Dominion fleet had seen before. It was a wave of force, pure and simple, that spread out from the warship like a tidal wave through the void. The first ship in the fleet, an Imperial destroyer, was struck head-on. There was no explosion, no fire, just a sudden blinding flash of light, and then nothing. The ship, its crew, its weapons, its entire existence, erased in an instant. It was as though it had never been there at all. The next ship was hit, and then the next. In less than a minute, 4 ships had been disintegrated, their remains reduced to nothing but atoms scattered through space. The fleet commanders struggled to regain control, ordering evasive maneuvers, but the damage was done. The message had been sent. Humanity wasn't here to play games. They were here to remind the Empire that they had never truly been gone. Kalor's mind reeled as the fleet began to crumble before his eyes. Every tactic he had relied on, every strategy he had mastered was useless. This wasn't a war. This was an extinction event. The warship wasn't attacking, it was wiping them out. And it was only a matter of time before the rest of the Dominion followed. "Pull back!" Kalor shouted. "Retreat!" Now. But it was too late. As the remaining ships attempted to withdraw, the warship, silent and deadly, moved again. With impossible speed, it moved through the battle, effortlessly evading every attempt to strike it. The fleet, once mighty and proud, was falling apart, ship by ship, crew by crew, and all the while the warship above Vion Prime did not falter. It had no need to destroy the Empire. It was simply letting them destroy themselves. And in that moment, Kalor realized the truth. The Empire had already been defeated, not by weapons, not by ships, but by its own arrogance. The galaxy would remember not the Empire's glory, but its fall.